I found my grandfather's pocket watch in a shoebox that smelled like dust and camphor. It was heavier than it looked, brass dulled to the color of old coins, the glass face clouded with fine scratches. Inside the lid, a name was engraved in careful block letters, Isaac Levy, and beneath it, a date I'd never seen in family records, 1939. I hadn't known my grandfather long. He died when I was 8, a quiet man who spoke in the past tense even when talking about the present. My father never kept his things. Memorabilia weighs you down, he used to say, but the watch survived, buried under tax receipts and photographs of people I couldn't place. When I wound it, the ticking sounded wrong, too loud, too deliberate, like it was counting something other than seconds. The time was off by hours. I pulled the crown and turned it forward, one click at a time. The resistance was uneven, catching slightly between minutes, as if the gears were moving through grit. On the third click, the room flickered. That's the only word that fits. Not shook, not blurred. Flickered, like an old film jumping frames. The hum of the refrigerator stuttered and stopped. The air went cold, sharp with a smell I didn't recognize then. When the world settled, my apartment was gone. I stood in a narrow room with bare walls and a single window barred with iron. Outside, smoke smeared the sky a sickly gray. The watch was still in my hand, ticking louder now, each second landing like a hammer. A siren wailed somewhere close. Boots pounded past the door. Someone shouted in a language I understood just well enough to feel my stomach drop. German. I stumbled to the window. Below, the street crawled with people moving in lines, heads down, coats hanging loose on bodies that looked already half erased. Yellow stars caught the light like wounds. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Same face, same clothes. But on my sleeve, stitched crudely into my jacket, was a star I had never worn, one my grandfather had once touched with shaking fingers before telling me to go play outside. The watch ticked. And somewhere in the building, a door slammed shut, locking me into a life I did not recognize, but somehow already knew. Someone pounded on the door. Not a knock. A flat, impatient oodar, strike, followed by a rattle of keys. I jumped back from the window, heart hammering, the watch clutched so tight in my fist that the edges bit into my palm. "Aufmachen!" a voice barked. I didn't know what to do. My apartment instincts screamed don't answer, but this wasn't my apartment, and I could feel, no, that not answering would be worse. The door opened anyway. A woman stepped in first, her hair wrapped in a scarf, her face drawn thin like the skin had been stretched too tight over bone. Behind her stood a man in a gray uniform, rifle slung loose but ready. His eyes swept the room with practiced boredom. She looked at me and exhaled in relief. "You're still here," she said softly, in German, touched with something else. Yiddish, maybe. "I thought they'd taken you already." Taken me where?" I asked. The uniformed man glanced over. Quiet. She flinched, then lowered her voice. "You're on the list today," she whispered. "Factory reassignment. That's what they're calling it now." The word factory settled into my gut like a stone. The man checked a clipboard. "Isaac Levy," he said, mispronouncing the name carved into the watch. "You're late." "That's my grandfather's name," I said before I could stop myself. Both of them stared at me. The woman's eyes searched my face. "Isaac," she said carefully. "Are you unwell?" "War." The room tilted. My name was gone. In its place was his. The watch ticked, steady and merciless, as if approving the correction. My mouth felt dry. "I think there's been a mistake." The man laughed once, sharp and humorless. "There are no mistakes anymore." They marched me down the stairwell and into the street. The cold bit through my clothes. Smoke drifted from somewhere I couldn't see, carrying a bitter, oily smell that coated the back of my throat. Lines of people moved in the same direction, all of us wearing the same star, the same hollow expression of practiced endurance. As we walked, memories that weren't mine began to press in. A bakery I had passed 100 times, a sister who laughed too loud, a mother who said keep your head down like it was a prayer. They felt real. Too real. At the corner, a truck idled. Armed men shouted numbers. People were loaded in groups, separated with quick gestures and no explanations. When my turn came, the clipboard man hesitated. "You were a watchmaker," he said, squinting at the page. "Skilled labor." My chest tightened. The watch in my hand felt heavier, warmer. "Yes," I heard myself say. The word came out naturally, like I'd said it all my life. The man nodded. "You'll be useful longer then." Longer. They shoved me onto the truck. As it lurched forward, I finally dared to open the watch again. The hands trembled, hovering just before the minute I'd set. I twisted the crown back one click. Nothing happened. The ticking didn't stop. And as the truck rolled toward the smoke, I understood the truth my grandfather had never spoken aloud. This wasn't a door you could open and close. It was a place you were meant to survive, or not, 1 second at a time. The truck stopped after what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. We were herded into a brick complex that smelled of oil, sweat, and something metallic that clung to the tongue. Inside, the noise was constant, machines clattering, belts turning, men shouting over one another in clipped commands, a factory in the narrowest, most dishonest sense of the word. A foreman with ink-stained fingers grabbed my wrist and inspected my hands. "Good," he muttered. "Not soft." He shoved me toward a long table crowded with tiny gears, springs, and half-disassembled watches. The sight of them hit me harder than the rifle barrels had. I sat. My fingers moved before I told them to. They knew where to go, how much pressure to use, how to coax a stubborn spring into place without snapping it. The muscle memory wasn't mine, but it lived in me now, layered over my own like a second skeleton. Across the table, an old man watched me work. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes too bright. "You fix time," he said quietly in Yiddish. "That's dangerous work." I swallowed. "It's just watches." He smiled without humor. "Here, everything that measures time is dangerous." Hours passed, or maybe days. The watch on my table, the one I'd brought with me, was gone, confiscated at intake, tossed into a bin of personal effects like it was nothing. I felt its absence like a missing tooth, my tongue worrying the space where it should have been. That night, in the barracks, I dreamed my grandfather was sitting at the foot of my cot. He didn't speak. He just held the pocket watch open, the hands spinning wildly, faster and faster, until they blurred into a single shining line. I woke with a gasp. The watch was in my hand. Cold. Solid. Real. Someone must have slipped it back to me, or maybe it had never left. I didn't question it. I just stared at the face, at the second hand crawling forward with unbearable patience. My hands shook as I pulled the crown. "Don't," the old man hissed from the darkness. "You don't go back the way you think." "Well, I have to," I whispered. "This isn't my life." He turned toward me, eyes catching the faint light. "It is now." I twisted the crown anyway, just one click back. The barracks dissolved into noise and light. For a heartbeat, I smelled my apartment again. Coffee, detergent, safety. Then the watch snapped shut in my hand. I was still on the cot. Morning sirens wailed. The old man was gone. And carved into the inside of the watch lid, beneath my grandfather's name, was a new scratch, fresh and deep. "Not yet,"